September 1986. The Politburo pauses. A man has been shot. Not a general. Not a defector with a stolen jet. An engineer who spent 6 years robbing the KGB blind. 21 meetings with the CIA on the streets of Moscow. The most heavily surveilled city on earth. Never once caught in the act. So if the KGB never caught him spying, who destroyed him? You're cleared for this file. Moscow, January 12, 1977. A freezing, miserable night at a gas station reserved for foreign diplomats. A middle-aged Russian walks up to the only car with American plates and asks the driver a single question. "Are you American?" Then he drops a folded note onto the seat and vanishes into the dark. The man behind the wheel, by pure blind chance, is Robert Fulton, the CIA's Moscow station chief. The note is meticulous. It asks to discuss matters on a strictly confidential basis with an appropriate American official. It comes with sketched meeting sites and a signaling system using parked cars. Whoever wrote this has engineered his own tradecraft before ever meeting a real spy. His name, though the CIA won't learn it for over a year, is Adolf Tolkachev, a radar engineer with a top-secret clearance. One of 25 people in a single open office deep inside the Soviet Union's premier design house for military airborne radar. His wife, Natasha, works at the very same institute as an antenna specialist. With his secrecy bonus, he earns about 350 rubles a month, nearly 3 times the average Soviet salary. And he lives on the 9th floor of one of Stalin's wedding cake skyscrapers, 400 meters from the United States Embassy. Close enough to loiter near diplomatic cars without anyone looking twice. In other words, the best-placed volunteer the CIA could ever dream of has just handed himself over at a gas station, and the CIA is about to say no. Headquarters refuses to respond. Langley has just been burned by compromised cases. It fears the note is a KGB dangle, bait designed to lure officers into a trap. And Secretary of State Cyrus Vance is about to visit Moscow. So nobody wants an incident. Tolkachev tries again on February 3rd, again 2 weeks later. A 4th time in May 1977, this time actually banging on the car. He is ignored every single time. In December 1977, he makes a 5th approach, and now the letter contains 2 typewritten pages of hard intelligence on Soviet aircraft electronics. The Moscow station chief, Gus Hathaway, pushes headquarters to act, and headquarters disapproves yet again in early January 1978. Then in February 1978, a memo arrives from the Pentagon declaring high American military interest in one specific subject: Soviet avionics and weapons control systems. Almost word for word what the stranger at the gas station has been offering. A coincidence of paperwork changes history. Langley finally says yes. February 16, 1978. Tolkachev is too frightened to write down his full phone number. He passes a note giving all but 2 digits. Then he stands in a bus stop queue holding 2 pieces of plywood. 1 missing digit painted on each, while the station chief's wife drives slowly past and records them. On March 1st, he hands over 11 handwritten pages identifying himself completely. He confesses he has spent hours and hours roaming the streets, hunting American diplomatic cars, losing his nerve tens of times. If he is refused again, he writes, he will give up. 4 days later, around 10 at night, a CIA officer named John Gilsher, after hours spent shaking off surveillance, dials Tolkachev's number from a public phone at the Bolshoi Theater. It is the first live contact, 14 months after the gas station. That August comes the first dead drop. Secret writing carbon, a one-time pad, and cover letters, all concealed inside a filthy construction worker's mitten left beside a phone booth near his apartment. why would a privileged, cleared, well-paid Soviet engineer risk a bullet in the back of the head? The answer begins 4 decades earlier, in the Great Terror. At the height of Stalin's purges in 1937 or 1938, his wife, Natasha's mother, was executed. Her father was branded an enemy of the state and spent roughly 18 years in the labor camps. Freed in 1955, he died soon after. Tolkachev told his handlers that this brutality against his own family was a key factor in his decision to work against the Soviet regime. He himself once suggested that Natasha's family was Jewish, which in the era of Stalinist anti-Semitism may have marked them for persecution. He called himself a dissident at heart. The banned writings of Solzhenitsyn and Sakharov, he said, played a significant role in his decision, and he described the feeling in one unforgettable line. Some inner worm started to torment me. Something has to be done. He considered writing dissident leaflets and rejected the idea as useless. Espionage became his substitute for dissent, and he understood exactly what that meant. I have chosen a course which does not permit one to move backward. He had made the decision 5 or 6 years before he ever acted, but waited until my son grew up, knowing that, in case of a flap, my family would face a severe ordeal. He never joined the Communist Party. Its politics, he said, had become enmeshed in such an impassable, hypocritical demagogy. And there was one final spark. Viktor Belenko, the pilot who flew his MiG-25 to Japan in 1976. From his own Institute security briefings, Tolkachev learned exactly how much that single defection had cost the Soviet Union, and decided he wanted to do what Belenko did. Not with one airplane, with all of them. Turn the page. The next 100 pages are why this file stayed sealed for 30 years. New Year's Day, 1979. 2 years after the gas station, the CIA finally shakes his hand. The first face-to-face meeting. 40 minutes walking through the bitter cold. Tolkachev hands Gilsher 91 pages of handwritten notes. 91 pages. I counted them twice. Gilsher would later remark that his new agent was probably one of the few sober Russians in Moscow that holiday. 91 pages was just the opening move. Over roughly 6 years, Tolkachev delivered complete details of Soviet airborne radar and weapons systems, an entire family of air-to-air missiles, the S-300 surface-to-air system, and the radars and avionics of the MiG-29, the MiG-31, and the Su-27. Often 5 to 10 years before those systems were ever deployed. America wasn't just reading the Soviet Air Force's mail. It was reading its diary. Hold on to that. It comes back over a desert in 1991. By March 1979, a military memo to the Director of Central Intelligence was calling his documentation of incalculable value, and a seminar of senior defense analysts that May judged his data had saved up to 5 years of research and development time. By December 1979, the Defense Department reported that because of this one man, the U.S. Air Force had completely reversed direction on a multi-million-dollar electronics package for one of its latest fighters. The sheer volume broke the system. In March 1980, the CIA estimated that simply clearing the backlog of his material would require 8 clerks and 3 full-time Russian translators working for 7 to 8 weeks. In the last months of 1979 alone, he delivered more than 150 rolls of film. At a single meeting in June 1980, almost 200. Across the operation, hundreds of rolls of film, hundreds of pages of notes. In October 1980, Gilsher handed the case to a new officer, David Rolfe, and the machine never slowed down. put a number on him. In mid-1980, the U.S. Air Force did $2 billion in research and development. Saved. $2 billion. Just 2 years in. A Pentagon memo that September went further, calling the impact of his reporting limitless in terms of enhancing U.S. military systems' effectiveness and in the potential to save lives and equipment, shaping billions of dollars of American research. And a CIA assessment added the coldest calculation of all. Even if he were caught tomorrow, his material would hold its value for 8 to 10 years. The time the Soviets would need to redesign everything he had compromised. Then there was the money. When the CIA offered him the equivalent of about $100,000, he clarified, almost offended, that by 6 figures he had meant 6 zeros. His logic was pure engineering. If Belenko's one stolen MiG-25 had cost the USSR $3 billion to fix, then several $1 million is not too fantastic a price for everything he was handing over. The deal they struck in May 1980. A salary equal to the President of the United States, rising every year. Held in escrow at 8.75% interest, paid out annually in rubles. He then insisted the ruble payments be calculated at the black market rate. The real rate, 4 times the official one. And the CIA agreed. By December 1983, the escrow held over $1 million and single cash deliveries on Moscow streets exceeded 100,000 rubles. One handoff. 69 years of an ordinary Soviet worker's wages. Part of his pay even arrived as antique 19th century Russian gold jewelry, quietly sourced from antique shops across Europe and America. Pieces he could explain away as heirlooms left to him by his mother. He barely wanted any of it. He was demanding a fortune he could never openly spend. One visible dollar of it would have been his death warrant. The money, he told his handlers, was proof that the CIA truly valued his work. A scoreboard, not a fortune. He proposed donating part of it to the families of repressed dissidents and asked the CIA to hire someone full-time, paid out of his own escrow, just to handle his shopping requests. And what a shopping list it was. Rock cassettes, a Walkman, stereo, headphones, and drafting supplies for his son. Western razor blades, because, he explained, shaving with Soviet razor blades is an unpleasant operation. And books. Solzhenitsyn, a Russian Bible. Golda Meir's memoirs. Even the Pentagon's own publication on Soviet military power. The man being paid a president's salary mostly wanted razor blades and forbidden paperbacks. How do you actually steal an air force? The CIA's first answer nearly sank the operation. The spy camera issued in February 1979 was a matchbox-sized device shooting 70 to 80 exposures a roll. Too loud, too shaky, needing a 13-inch stack of books to steady it. And most of the early frames came back unreadable. The fix was gloriously ordinary. From June 1979, he used a Pentax 35mm camera clamped to the back of a chair in his own apartment. Imagine you're him. Every day at lunch, you slide top-secret documents under your coat. Walk them past the guards and home. Wife at work, son at school. Photograph them page by page and slip them back before the library reopens. Winter means a heavy coat, and a heavy coat means big hauls. Summer's thin clothes mean drought. When security tightened in December 1979 and documents could no longer leave the building, he carried miniature cameras into the men's toilet at the Institute and photographed them there. Later moving to a better-lit toilet in an adjacent building, 20 to 25 minutes a session. And then Soviet bureaucracy performed a small miracle. The lunch hour document restriction was lifted because women on the staff complained they could no longer go shopping at lunch. The paperwork state had accidentally reopened the CIA's best pipeline in the world. Around him grew a whole ecosystem of tradecraft. The CIA's technical service forged a duplicate of his building pass and a clean library sign-out card, which he swapped in to erase the paper trail of everything he had borrowed. And to get the pass color exactly right, he tore a strip off his real one and handed it over. There were wrong number phone calls on date-coded days, dead drops code-named Olga, Anna, and Nina, chalk marks, parked car signals, burst transmission radios the size of 2 cigarette packs, a shortwave receiver returned because his apartment offered no privacy to use it, and an opened transom window that meant ready to meet. Remember that window. His case officers ran surveillance detection routes lasting hours. In June 1980, Gilshire went out disguised in working-class Russian clothes with a heavy dose of garlic and vodka splashed on himself. And in December 1982, the CIA deployed a device straight out of a heist film, used for the first time on this very operation. The Jack-in-the-Box, a pop-up dummy torso that springs upright in the passenger seat the moment a case officer rolls out of a moving car. So the KGB tail spends the rest of the night following a mannequin around Moscow. But the darkest piece of equipment was the one Tolkachev demanded for himself. From April 1979, he insisted on a suicide pill. In his own words, "I would not like to carry on a conversation with organs of the KGB." CIA Director Stansfield Turner refused. Tolkachev wrote to the director personally in June 1980, and eventually the agency issued him a cyanide L-pill concealed inside a fountain pen. His reasoning wasn't panic. It was engineering to the very end. His death would deny the KGB any knowledge of what he had passed, crippling the Soviet damage assessment. From the beginning, he was planning for the version of this story where he doesn't survive. April 1983. A security investigation into a leak sweeps through his world, and it terrifies him. He drives to the family dacha and burns his spy gear, hurling the charred metal from the car window on the way back. And then he does something almost unbearable to picture. For days, every time he is summoned to his boss's office, he walks in with the cyanide pill under his tongue. Every knock could be the last. The CIA's cable from that period reads, "This is indeed a driven man. Right up to the end, even if that end is his death." The investigation passes. He goes back to work, and back to spying. Turn the page. But here is what nobody in Moscow could have known. The real danger that April wasn't inside the Institute at all. It was inside the CIA. Now, the question this story opened with: if the KGB never once caught him in the act, who destroyed him? The answer is his own side. Twice. Edward Lee Howard was a young CIA officer groomed to become a Tolkachev handler in Moscow. Briefed on the operation itself, before the agency fired him in April 1983. Howard went to the KGB. According to the defector Yurchenko, he met Soviet intelligence in Vienna, and he is strongly suspected of betraying Tolkachev. Then in 1985, Aldrich Ames, the CIA counterintelligence officer secretly selling his colleagues to Moscow, gave the KGB Tolkachev's name as well. Which betrayal reached the KGB first, and which one actually killed him, remains officially undetermined to this day. The CIA's own historian of the case put it bleakly: Tolkachev's days would have been numbered, even if Howard had not betrayed him. The greatest agent the CIA ever ran in Moscow was never beaten by the KGB's watchers. He was sold twice over by the institution he risked everything to serve. January 1985. What will turn out to be the final meeting? The CIA hands over fresh subminiature cameras and a cash delivery of more than 100,000 rubles. The film he returns comes back blank, shot, it seems, on a day too cloudy for the exposure. Then in mid-March 1985, something quietly wrong happens. A meeting signal appears at his apartment, an open transom window. But it is a window Tolkachev normally never used. Was the KGB already inside his life, running his signals back at the CIA? Or was it Tolkachev himself sending one last desperate warning? To this day, no one knows. 2 pages left in this file. Early June 1985. A road outside Moscow. The family car returning from the dacha. KGB Alpha Group commandos under Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Zitsev ambush the car. They drag Tolkachev out, pin his arm, and pry his mouth open so he cannot reach the pill. A KGB cameraman films the entire takedown. The footage still exists, and the KGB isn't finished. On June 13th, Case Officer Paul Skip Stombaugh walks toward a scheduled meeting carrying 125,000 rubles. 5 subminiature cameras hidden in key fobs, medicine, books, and 250 pages of Western press. A delivery for a man who is already in a cell. At the meeting site, more than a dozen KGB security personnel dressed in military camouflage uniforms who had been hiding in some nearby bushes erupt around him. He is held at the Lubyanka from 9:40 that night until 20 past midnight. Then he is expelled from the Soviet Union. TASS announces the affair the very next day, though it will not name Tolkachev publicly until September. September 25, 1986, the Politburo, the summit of Soviet powers, pauses in its meeting. KGB Chairman Chebrikov reports yesterday Tolkachev's sentence was carried out. He had been shot the day before. Mikhail Gorbachev adds his own epitaph. American intelligence paid him generously. He was caught with 2 million rubles. 2 million rubles. For a man who had asked for razor blades. Years later, one former CIA historian argued Tolkachev had been too good to be true. A KGB plant all along. It is a theory most historians reject. It is hard to explain why the Politburo, speaking in private, would confirm executing a man they had invented. And the betrayers? September 21st, 1985. Edward Lee Howard escapes FBI surveillance in Santa Fe, a moving car jump out, and a homemade dummy in the passenger seat. 3 years earlier, the CIA had used that same trick on the KGB. He becomes the first CIA officer known to defect to the Soviet Union. The dummy sits in an FBI museum today. He died at his dacha outside Moscow on July 12, 2002, reportedly from a fall that broke his neck. The details were never officially confirmed. Aldrich Ames was arrested in 1994, pleaded guilty, and is serving life in an American federal prison. One thing the bullet could not stop. Why was a dead man still winning a war? 5 years after his arrest, a joint task force was still working through his files. And in 1991, over the deserts of Iraq, American pilots met Soviet-built fighters in Desert Storm and defeated them in staggeringly lopsided fashion. Hoffman's account draws the line straight back to the engineer with the Pentax. The CIA had once predicted his material would outlive his capture by 8 to 10 years. It did. The escrow account, more than $1 million he never touched, was still sitting there. By one account, Natasha later wrote to the Americans and never received a reply. Their son, Oleg, who, according to the CIA's own account, was never told what his father was doing, went on to become a prominent Moscow architect. The drawing pens in Stombaugh's bag that June night were meant for him. One more page. The file calls him CK Sphere. 6 years, 944 pages of secret cables. Never his name, never his face. This is what he actually looked like. A building pass. The same kind he tore a strip from so the CIA could copy it. He had told them the truth at the very beginning. He had chosen a course that does not permit one to move backward. He never did. Today, a portrait of Adolf Tolkachev hangs at CIA headquarters, widely reported as the only Russian agent ever honored that way. That's everything the file contains. It isn't everything that happened. Your clearance was temporary. One click below makes it permanent. File 002 is already on my desk.